again, how many of you are gamers? Raise your hand. Now, if you're a man, put your hand down. Okay, so we've got a couple women in here who like to play. Let's get going here. In 2011, consumers spent nearly $25 billion on video games. And in 2012, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 sold 2.7 million units. That's a lot of money. Video games is fastly becoming a very lucrative industry. So 68% of households play video games, and 40% of the users are women out of the total amount of video game players. So that's quite a big percentage. So what I'm really looking at here today are how are women represented in first and third person shooter video games. So that first and third person shooters, they're very action oriented, they're centered around shooting. So you're given a gun and your objective basically is to run around and kill people. So we often find that there are 4 stereotypes that often follow women within these within this genre of video games. We have the damsel in distress, and now this is a beautiful woman who needs to be saved by a man. You can look at a lot of Disney movies like Aladdin or The Little Mermaid. Then you have over-sexualization. So these are very sexually suggestive, revealing clothing, unrealistic proportions on women. You can look at Catwoman or Black Widow from the Avengers for that. Then we have the seductive villain, and this is a woman who is a pretty main character, but she's a villain. You have that movie Basic Instinct. It surrounds a murder, and the seductive woman is involved. And Bedazzled, the woman is actually a devil and likes to grant wishes. And then you have Absent, and this is where women simply just don't exist. And you can look at Toy Story for that. And you might say, oh, well, Toy Story has Mrs. Potato Head and Jessie, but a good way to gauge whether women are actually present in a video game or a movie is through the Bechdel test. Now, this was created by Alison Botta, and 3 questions we always need to ask ourselves to see how present women are is, are there 2 women who have names? Do they talk to each other? And do they talk to each other about something other than a man? If no, they fail the Bechdel test, and they are not really present in the video game or the movie, depending on what we're analyzing. So I have a short little clip right here of the damsel in distress. It's by Anita Sarkeesian. She is a YouTube blogger, and she has a feminist frequency. That's the name of her blog. So let's take a look at that.
Let's start with the story of a game that no one ever got to play. Back in 1999, game developer Rare was hard at work on a new original title for the Nintendo 64 called Dinosaur Planet. The game was to star a 16-year-old hero named Crystal as one of 2 playable protagonists. She was tasked with traveling through time, fighting prehistoric monsters with her magical staff, and saving the world. She was strong, she was capable, and she was heroic.
And who might you be, animal girl?
My name is Crystal.
Pretty cool, right? Well, it would have been, except the game never got released. As development on the project neared completion, legendary game designer Shigeru Miyamoto joked about how he thought it should be the 3rd installment in his Star Fox franchise instead. Over the next 2 years, he and Nintendo did just that. They rewrote and redesigned the game and released it as Star Fox Adventures for the GameCube in 2002. In this revamped version, the would-be protagonist Crystal has been transformed into a damsel in distress and spends the vast majority of the game trapped inside a crystal prison, waiting to be rescued by the new hero Fox McCloud. The in-game action sequences that were originally built for Crystal were converted to feature Fox instead. Crystal is given a skimpier, more sexualized outfit.
Wow, she's beautiful. What am I doing?
And yes, that is cheesy saxophone music playing to make sure it's crystal clear that she is now an object of desire, even while in suspended animation. To add insult to injury, Fox is now using her magical staff to fight his way through the game to save her. The tale of how Crystal went from protagonist of her own epic adventure to the passive victim in someone else's game illustrates how the damsel in distress trope disempowers female characters and robs them of the chance to be heroes in their own right.
Another example of third-person shooter, however, is Resident Evil 4. This is centered around a man's quest to rescue the president's daughter. And for any of you who have actually played Resident Evil 4, you would definitely know that Ashley, the president's daughter, is an extremely large burden on the main character. It's extremely annoying to have her with you, because during a section of the game you actually do have her with you, and you have to make sure she doesn't get kidnapped. And she just stands there and screams, which is not useful to anyone. So now we have a new topic, which is the over-sexualization of women. And it's really important to remember that video games is part of geek culture, and as geek culture, it's predominantly male. So it caters predominantly to a male audience that supposedly makes up this viewing. So for example, you know, as we now know, 40% of all video gamers are girls. So it might not necessarily be as predominantly male as they claim it to be. However, it's still treated that way within the industry. If a girl wants to see herself represented in video games, she better get used to the idea of being the prize at the bottom of the cereal box, which is really unfortunate since so many women actually do play video games. The art director of Deus Ex Human Revolution stated that he was always trying to have very beautiful female characters, noting that these were characters that he would want to sleep with. Now, obviously, if you're a woman playing the video game, you're not going to have these same feelings, so this definitely caters more to that male gaze that we talked about earlier. A good example is Grand Theft Auto 4. So, with the exception of 4 female characters that are a part of the storyline, most of the females in the game are just sex objects. So, for example, the player can have sex with a prostitute to regenerate his health, which we all know that will not regenerate your health. And the player can also visit a strip club, but there is no benefit from doing so. So why is it there? It's really just there for that male gaze. It's for that predominantly heterosexual male that plays video games. So next we have something called the seductive villain. Now this is a woman who uses her body as a means to get power over a man through seduction and deceit. However, this only works if the man is swayed by her sexuality. If not, she has no power. Okay, so some common themes. It's always important to remember that this is not just video games. This happens all throughout media. Society has regularly depicted women as whimsical, deceitful, and untrustworthy. Corporate decision makers become primary shapers of how we see the world and interpret its meaning. Their shared values translate into an ideology that is consistently conveyed in the media. And that's why so many of these video games have the same plot lines, the same attitudes towards women and men. So, women are often underrepresented, more frequently sexualized, more attractive, less powerful, and dressed more scantily than males. So, for example, we have Citra from Far Cry 3. So, when you get to the island that you crash on, your name is Jason, and Citra very kindly gives you a welcome, stripper pole dance, which we all know that's what we do when we welcome men into our house. So after that, she becomes your friend. She teaches you how to become a very strong warrior. And spoiler alert, halfway through the game, she gives you an ultimatum. Either you can stay on the island and live with her and kill your friends, or you can leave with your friends and forget about the island. Now, if you are swayed by Citra's sexuality, and you decide, hey, yeah, I want to stay on that island with Citra, she'll profess her love to you, and you'll have some nice graphic sex, and afterwards, as soon as you finish, she will stab you in the heart and thank you for the child that will now be the new leader of her tribe, which is awfully nice, so in short, you die. If you decide that, hey, you know what, Citra, you're not that important to me, I'm going to save my friends, she ends up dying in the scuffle, and you leave the island, and that's that. So it's quite obvious that she has the power only if the man is buying into that sexuality she's giving. The same thing can go for Excella from Resident Evil 5. Now, she is extremely smart. She is the CEO of her corporation and the lead developer of the virus that is featured within this game. However, she is trying to get to be a partner to Albert Wesker, and he is the main antagonist of the Resident Evil series. And Wesker is not having any of it. He doesn't really care about Excella, no matter how she looks. And he ends up injecting her with the very same virus she helped develop, and she turns into a giant squid-like monster, and which the main character you are forced to kill. So next we have absent, and this is our final topic. So it's important to remember that there is ideological significance of missing representations and silences. So essentially, whatever is present is assumed to be the norm, and whatever isn't there is just ignored. It doesn't matter. So traditionally, in Women in War, in the U.S. military, women have been nurses and cooks and excluded access in combat. However, about a year ago, this ban on women was lifted so that they can now fight in the frontline combat situations, which is important since women do make up 14% of the 1.4 million active U.S. military personnel. Sorry about that. So we have this concept of hegemony, and hegemony operates at the level that we accept something as natural or the way things are. So it's just natural that women aren't as strong as men, they're to be protected, and they really shouldn't be here on the front lines. So women are still culturally seen as inadequate for combat, and the military has kept women out of direct ground combat for a moral reason. Deliberately putting women in harm's way is not right. So what does this really say about women? It says that they can't really take care of themselves, they're a liability, which we all know that's not necessarily true. So if we look at Call of Duty Black Ops 2, this is actually the 12th game in the series, and it is the first one to actually have a female that you can play as for a short time. Her name is Chloe Lynch, aka Karma. However, unfortunately, 2 out of 3 scenarios involving Chloe, she gets killed in. And if she dies, you cannot play as her, which is really unfortunate, since it would be a very nice thing for a girl to play Call of Duty, since many girls do like Call of Duty. And another example is Resident Evil 6. So 4 of the 3 campaigns have female playable characters, and the only campaign without a woman is Chris Redfield's campaign, and he is a soldier in the military. So is that really necessarily a coincidence, or is this an underlying thing in our society that women can't really take care of themselves in battle, so that they shouldn't really be there? And I would hate to leave this off on a terrible, sad note, so we have a fair representation right here. Her name is Samus Aran. She is from the Metroid series, and she has been popular with both men and women for over 20 years, which is really impressive. It shows she has an amazing staying power with both audiences. And some might argue, hey, well, Samus was originally thought to be a man, so could that have anything to do with the fact that she's so successful now, because it's such a big shocker? And I can't really answer that question. However, I do think it's great that such a strong, powerful female is such a popular character. She's an ex-soldier turned into a bounty hunter. So she definitely gets into a lot of trouble, and she knows how to find her way out of it. The only downfall of the new Metroid video games, such as Metroid Other M, is that Samus now wears a very skin-tight bodysuit outside of her armor with some unrealistic proportions. So we're kind of taking a little bit of a step back. But for such an iconic and monumental character, you can kind of overlook it a little bit because she's still such a great representation. And that is the end of my slide show. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions for either of us before you go? Questions about video games, about representations of women?
Alison, are you a gamer?
I am.
You are?
Yes.
Favorite game?
My favorite game?
Yeah.
Call of Duty. Black Ops 2.
Did you count Tomb Raider as a first-person shooter?
It can be. I mean, it's kind of hard to. Yeah, there's so many games that can fall into the category and that cannot. I suppose that one can. The only reason why I didn't mention her is because she's so over-sexualized that she's not necessarily that fair of a representation.